welcome to my talk. The room's a lot more full than I expected. You'll see me looking at this screen a bit because for some reason Mirror isn't working. Okay, so I'm talking about geographically distributed clusters by yours truly, Alex Bissessur. So a bit about me. I'm a Kubernetes and cloud enthusiast. I'm one of the organizers of Cloud Native Mauritius. I work at this cool company called La Sentinelle back home. I'm like the Kubernetes person there. I like a lot of things, Linux, free and open source software, and so on. And that's me with my home lab. It's in the living room, and it's fun having a Kubernetes cluster in the living room. If you don't have one, I encourage that you do have one. So that's how I started with Kubernetes, and then I ended up here. So, all right. The cloud in Mauritius. So, does anyone here not know where Mauritius is? Oh, wow, a lot of you have gone on holiday there, it must seem. So, Mauritius is a small tropical island in the Indian Ocean. If you want to put it, it's like east of Madagascar. Well, at least the government likes to say that we are the fintech hub of Africa, which is a lot of big words which don't really apply. I'm here, well, we're talking about cloud native. So what is the status of cloud native in Mauritius? Not good. It's more like cloud naive, as I like to say. So until very recently, the government's official stance was that, hey, the cloud is really bad, don't use the cloud, everything stays in Mauritius. And then they started putting our data on the cloud and all of a sudden it was fine. But other than that, many companies, they view the cloud basically just as someone else's computer or a VM on AWS. They don't see cloud for the possibilities of cloud native or the whole landscape which comes with it. So fortunately, I work at a company which sees Kubernetes like as something valuable, but that's not the general case in Mauritius. And as a consequence, I think we've lacked a lot of the development which could have brought us to a more cloud native technological landscape back home. So I think one of the interesting things to show is the networking situation back in Mauritius. We're here. Little tiny dot. So zoom in a bit. There. We've got maybe 2 or 3 internet cables under the sea which connect us to the rest of the world. And for a country which says that it's like the fintech hub, the technology hub of Africa, having only those few connections is a real problem. Because sometimes you get internet outages when something happens to one of those cables, and now all of a sudden ping to Europe is like 600 milliseconds. Or even just to South Africa, which is where the closest data centers, like for AWS, are. Even that skyrockets when a cable gets damaged. So big problem. And unless I'm mistaken, it was last year or the year before that, I think we had 2 cable breakages, so we were basically isolated. It was really painful and, yeah, not at all conducive to having any sort of cloud native or, really fancy technological developments. And we've got cloud service providers, sort of. There's only one that I'm aware of. It's called cloud.mu. So they do VPSs, web hosting, etc. But if you want anything like AWS, GCP, Azure, or any of those, it is literally an ocean away. South Africa or Indonesia, which are the 2 closest ones ping-wise. And unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get those companies which have data centers in Mauritius, which would be really nice, just saying, because they've got really strict requirements like network redundancy. They can't afford that you lose a cable, you lose your connection to half of the world. Power redundancy, we've only got one company which does power, and space issues. You need minimum of, I think, 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers between data centers, and we don't have that kind of space. So the closest, South Africa, 60 milliseconds and an undersea cable away. Now, I'm bringing this up more like to share the culture, because here in Europe, I'm sure you'll take for granted how you've got data centers all over the place, data center in your backyard, all of that kind of stuff. So we don't have that, and that's actually the basis for why we did what we did, which is a bit of I don't want to say shit post, but it is basically a shit post, but for tech. So the solution: the world is your home lab. Embrace it. So, as you saw, I have a home lab, and I thought, well, we have an island. The island isn't even that big. So what if we turned our island into a big home lab, or rather, a set of home labs? So, because the home lab at my place, it's really cool and all. It hosts sort of cool services, my website and stuff, really nice. But when I lose power, which is a bit often, then everything's down. No website, which is like really tragic for the 5 people who view it. And we all know the cloud companies which have multi-cloud. So in case Google Cloud deletes your billion-dollar infrastructure, you can fail over to Azure or wherever else. So yeah, they use multi-cloud for better redundancy, for all those really cool perks. So we said, what if we do multi-cloud, but multi-home lab? So everything then would be orchestrated through Kubernetes. It would be basically a cluster which would span the entirety of the island. And it was a challenge. It was a lot of fun, and it's still operational today. So the plan. We are going to have at least 3 locations, i.e. 3 houses, not data centers, 3 machines at least per house, because that gives us quite a few nodes all over the place. We can throw workloads wherever we want. And they'd all be joined in one big Kubernetes cluster. So that's the base plan. That's what we want for redundancy, for that kind of stuff. So we use some cool tech. K3s, first of all, because it's lightweight, and I already use K3s on my home lab. I like K3s. Longhorn is going to do the persistent storage and replication for me. I've got Minio and S3 for backups, because backups are important. And for now, we are using Tailscale. And I'm going to get to why we use Tailscale, but it's basically used to connect everything together. Because we've got some 9 nodes spread across the island, different IPs, different ways of connecting to them. And so now Tailscale. But it's going to get replaced sometime soon. Some of the concerns which we had, it started with latency. Now, if you're going to do something like maybe just across London, which already is bigger than Mauritius, I think, you're going to have concerns with latency, because the default etcd heartbeat for liveness is timeout of 100 milliseconds. So any more than that, and now you're a bit in trouble. Then we've got power cuts. If we put the control plane in one place, then if you have power cuts, or we have cyclones and stuff at home, if something gets damaged, boom, out. We also have an inconvenience with IP changes. So our ISPs, they tend to rotate our IP every 24 hours. So in my case, with my single home lab, I just use DDNS with Cloudflare to update my IP. But when you're running Kubernetes with many nodes all across the island, and you've got to, orchestrate them all together, having the IP change every 24 hours is a real pain. So that's one of the reasons we went with Tailscale, because we don't have to do IP forwarding, DDNS, all those complicated things, which would have probably made our life a bit harder in terms of managing the cluster. And then bandwidth, because usually you're recommended for a Kubernetes cluster, you'd like to have gigabit connections, and I'm sure for you people it's like 10 gigabit connections. So thankfully, within Mauritius, we have really good internet within Mauritius, not outside. So we do have decent bandwidth. It's not too expensive. And actually, that's a really good advantage of within Mauritius, because the moment you go outside, you have really slow internet. It's not at all the same bandwidth. So, yeah. Right. Okay, so in terms of production use, because the end goal was to use this for a small startup which wanted to, use Kubernetes and also drive down costs, because running things on AWS or the local cloud provider would have been significantly more expensive than just buying a few second-hand mini PCs, stacking them together, and just calling it a day. So we had to do some changes to the cluster in order to support them. We've added some exit nodes to Tailscale, because there are some nodes which aren't on the Kubernetes cluster, or on part of the Kubernetes cluster, but that you still like to access, some of them like being IP cameras and stuff like that, we are considering installing Tailscale and Kubernetes on those cameras, but that's a long-term project. And there's some AI stuff, which I'm not going to get much into. We are adding, therefore, like GPU nodes, which have the added performance for AI workloads. So yeah, that's kind of like what the cluster is. And now's a good time to mention, I wanted to get rid of Tailscale because the issue with Tailscale is that it's got a control sort of server where all the traffic would pass through. The issue is that we don't have a server like that in Mauritius, and replacing that server with Headscale, which we could put in Mauritius, would give us a lot better performance in terms of latency, because right now we're seeing like around 50 milliseconds, which, I mean, we're on a small island. Between each of our houses, it's like 1 to maybe 3 milliseconds. So we'd like to make the most of that and then replace Tailscale with Headscale, get lower latency, and then we can see about scaling up on the whole cluster. Wow, at the end already. Done. Okay, if there's anyone who's got questions, because I wasn't expecting it to go by that fast. Sorry. No questions or about like the structure? Yes.
How are you handling ingress? Is it via Tailscale XMLs or?
Okay, so that's an interesting part actually of the way we're doing it. One of my ideas in the future is to have the control plane on the cloud provider, cloud.mu, because then we'll have the advantage of it being in a data center, having UPS and all of those extra facilities, which I don't have at my place. Being on a cloud provider means that I do have external IPs, public IPs, which then I can direct the DNS entries for the website can go there, and it ingresses into the cluster through Tailscale. Yes?
Was the reason for Tailscale just simplicity, or were there more advantages over plain WireGuard?
I think plain WireGuard, it would have made my life a bit, it's just for, we wanted to play around with it. But we went with Tailscale because, well, first of all, it is fairly reliable. And the other issue being, if we've got 3 nodes in one place, we're wondering, well, how are we going to make sure that the traffic, because we only have one public IP now for 3 nodes, how are we going to make sure that the traffic goes where it's supposed to? And also, unfortunately, we don't have IPv6 in Mauritius, so that's unfortunate. Yes? Yeah, you.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Because a lot with the rough situation that you guys face in your island. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Second of that, if I understand correctly, there's a startup that is using that cluster.
Yes. Yeah.
But given the rough situation that you guys face in your island, how do you foresee, for example, if you need to scale that structure by adding more node clusters or whatever? How do you see that?
Okay. So how would we scale, like, given the rough situation that we have? Get more friends who are willing to host machines in their place. Like, that is the best solution. It is fairly scalable with Tailscale because it's just one IP for as many machines as you want. Oh, sorry, it's not one IP, one public IP, as many machines as you want. But we can find more locations. Unfortunately, something actually I should have mentioned is data center costs are astronomical. If you want a little bit of rack space, even in a shared rack, it costs a lot. Like, I'm sure by your standards here, it probably wouldn't cost that much, but, we're poor Africa. So yeah, scaling, get more machines, throw into the cluster through Tailscale, and fingers crossed it works. So that's our approach. Yes?
Do you have any solution for like image distribution, things like that, or like bandwidth is limited?
Okay, for bandwidth. It is not incredibly limited. We've still got like upload, download, like we've got 200 Mbps, well, at least that's my home plan. So it's not awful, but I do have my own Docker registry where we push things and then we can consume the images straight from there. So already the fact that I've got some nodes at my place, which is the same place as the registry, it's fast enough to get the images across. Yes?
Congratulations, I like this
Thank you.
mindset. I also went to Mauritius once, and I know that La Réunion is somehow like an internet exchange point, and driven by, of course, big demand somehow. Maybe I didn't get it in the beginning. Ah, okay.
Yes, La Réunion is right next to us. So we share a few lines, like the Métis one, the blue, and the other one which brings us to India and Indonesia. So yes, we're shared.
Okay, so you just, the next stop would be La Réunion, and from there, or do you have a direct connection there?
Yeah, actually, then in that case, yes, we would have direct connections to La Réunion. And it wouldn't be that bad because neighbors, so yeah.
We were talking about having friends, so doing cooperations like to La Réunion. Maybe it's better to just strengthen this connection than having distributing geographically data center there and on Mauritius. Would it be possible?
Oh, you give good ideas. That's actually that's actually a really interesting idea. I've got to find people with enough money. We're going to make a data center in each place and then link it and then get cloud providers to come. Although I'm not sure they'd appreciate it given that there's those cables between us. I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. I've got to research that. Yes.
So how big is the community of cloud people, like-minded people like you on Mauritius and maybe also on La Réunion?
Okay. Question was, what's the size of the cloud, specifically cloud community in Mauritius and La Réunion? La Réunion, I can't say much. I haven't been there. In Mauritius, we have Cloud Native Mauritius. I got a message from someone saying we're watching you from back home. Okay, the size. So Cloud Native Mauritius itself is 50 members. It isn't big, but it is significant, at least for our part of the world, which I'm going to say is not adapted, not evolved into the cloud native world yet. We do have meetups fairly regularly. The last one, I think, had 15 attendees. So that should give you a scale of, it's not like KubeCon or Reject size big. We do have an annual developers conference, which is like the biggest tech event. And that one, I think last year, I forgot the number actually. It was like 1,600 people. So we do have a really lively community. It is a significant number, especially for a small island. So we do have a very vibrant, very active community. Just in terms of cloud native, we're trying to indoctrinate them, you see, so gradually. Yes?
How about security? How do you take security into account? Like, it's really cool what you've been able to do, but how do you, especially with fintech and entering into that space, how do you approach security?
Okay, how do I approach security? Do you mean security for like my cluster or security like... Oh, my friends. Okay. I'm debating right now whether to slander people back home or... Yeah, they're watching me, but the government isn't. If you look at certain government websites, you will see that priority is not their first concern. I'm going to say that. For a lot of like the banks in Mauritius, we have, I mean, I'm sure they have their own way of doing it. Insurance companies have, the one I worked at for a while, when I worked at for a while, they had their servers in-house. So at least there's that. Another bank I know of, they have servers on AWS, especially given that the government's given a bit the green light for doing stuff on the cloud. I can't say what they do specifically for staying secure, but...
No, I'm just curious how you, like, when you're designing your system, or when you're designing, how important is security account for? Like, that wasn't specific.
Right. I assume that the banks, insurance companies, and big companies, they have stuff like that. But I think the general trend is that security is an afterthought. For most people, it's, yeah. Yes.
So, since this is kind of a small island, how difficult is for you to acquire hardware? What kind of hardware are you running on, and like, can you order a server and GPUs?
I love your question, because that is a serious problem I have as a home labber.
Yeah.
The stuff in my rack, most of it comes from here, from the UK, and I get it shipped all the way because it's cheaper to get it shipped from here, paying here and everything, than it is to buy used hardware, even second-hand hardware back home in Mauritius. Servers, expensive, because they're big, you gotta ship them. Servers, expensive. Oh, and networking as well is very expensive if you're a business. Like if you need like the resilience, to keep on functioning, if you've got issues on the cables, they're very expensive. I don't remember the exact numbers. My boss at home, he knows the numbers and they're not pretty. So servers, not cheap. Racks, not cheap. Like I saw here, you can buy racks because I want a 42U rack in my living room. I want one of those, but the problem is it's very expensive. Here you can buy something used off Facebook Marketplace. So what does a current cluster run on? A mix of Dell Optiplex Micros and Lenovo Think Centers, those really tiny boxes. We're talking about like i5 4th gen.
Yeah.
Do you feel privileged? Yes, I think I have time for one last question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for a great talk. I was just wondering if you have, like you said, 200 megabit connections between your houses. So how well is Longhorn performing over that?
Longhorn performs surprisingly well. Of course, I can do stuff like data locality if I really want the extra performance, but I've seen that replication and all that kind of stuff, even across our different locations, it isn't that bad. And especially once I've got head scale installed to replace tail scale, then I assume it's going to be a lot better, a lot more performant, and a lot more stable. Because as I said, it's like we decided, let's do a home lab but across the island. We didn't initially think it was going to be like that serious, but well, here we are, and here I am. Okay, yes? No. A funny story about that, actually, I'm getting more slander on my country. Last year there were elections, and then the government asked all ISPs to ban social media for like 24 hours. So I guess that kind of shows that Starlink would have been nice, but that wouldn't comply. You've got to get through the compliance with the Information Communication Technology Authority and stuff like that. So extra loopholes. And small country, I guess we're a bit of an afterthought to big companies like that. A lot of people are looking forward to it, though, I can say. Any other questions? Nope. Yes? Cool. Thank you very much for attending.